And finally, they laid the foundation, and we talked about how there is only one foundation that can be laid in our lives, Paul says in Corinthians. One foundation I laid. Then it's up to you to build on that foundation. But there is only one foundation that can provide a true foundation, that when the storms come, when the earthquakes come, that foundation is sure, and that foundation is Jesus Christ. It's Jesus Christ. What's the application of what we're doing here in looking at the book of Ezra? It's interesting history. It's a part of history that we have a lot of information about because a lot of the archaeology has found stuff about the Persian Empire and later the Greek Empire, and a lot of stuff reinforces exactly what we're reading here. But this isn't a history lesson. It's an application. And the idea is this. The way they came back to Jerusalem, they came and they built the altar first, representing our personal worship and submission to the Lord. Whether you're looking at a marriage that needs help, whether you're looking at your own personal life that needs help, whether you're looking at a situation, whatever it may be that needs help, needs the Lord's intervention, the first thing you need to do is you need to be right on with God through Jesus Christ. I tell people who come and ask for spiritual counseling about their marriage, I say, well, and often it's, well, what they are doing, I know I'm not perfect, but what they are doing, and my word to them always is, the thing you can control is you. You become the godly husband. You become the godly wife that God has called you to be, regardless of what your mate does. You do that first. And the only way you can do that is to first get on your knees, on your face, before the Lord God Almighty. Build the altar first. Worship God. Get that relationship right between you and God through Jesus Christ first. Then they built the temple. And that's what we're going to talk about today. They began building the temple on the foundation that was laid. In the same way, when we come to Christ, that foundation of Jesus Christ is laid in our life. And now it's up to us to build on it. Some of us are good builders. Some of us really stink. Some of us use really cheap building materials. Some of us use only the best. Some of us work, well, like we're going to find out today, lay the foundation, do a little bit of work, and then for various reasons go, let's take a break. Representing the establishment of our worship, or if you want to call it, our religion. Religion. Oh, Pastor, that's a bad word. I don't want religion, I want Jesus. Well, you have religion. You're doing a religious thing right now. Did you know that? You're sitting in church on Sunday morning. That's pretty religious if you ask me. Some of you will go back and worship God by putting money in the agape box. Whoa, that sounds pretty religious to me. You know the story about the plane that was going down? The pilot called on the radio and said, we've lost both engines. We're over the Pacific Ocean. There's nothing I can do. And the people in the plane are all going around and they see that there's a pastor there. And they say, Pastor, quick, do something religious. So he stood up and he took an offering. Yeah, I know, it's pretty bad. But we think of those things in terms of religious. How we worship God. We sing. And we sing primarily newer songs, though we sing hymns. We have guitar-led worship. And then I teach for a period of time. If you go to a church down the street who love the Lord and are worshiping God, you're going to find they do it differently. Our religion, how we establish what we do, how you personally establish your prayer life, your particular accounting for your riches before God, good stewardship, all of those things, those are your religious things. And that can be likened to building the temple. The first thing is the altar. You've got to have the altar first in the right place and worshiping God. Now build in your life the things around that altar to protect it, to encourage it, to establish it. And then finally they came in and they built the wall of the city to protect the city and the temple. And that's our lives outside of our religious life. That's the building of every other aspect of our life. Which if the altar is built, if the temple is built, the rest of our life, it's going to fall into place. It's going to fall into place. So now we come to the work stoppage. If you found your way to Ezra chapter 4, We pick it up in verse 1. It says, "Now when the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the descendants of the captivity were building the temple of the Lord God of Israel, they came to Zerubbabel." Now Zerubbabel was the leader. He was a grandson of Jehoiachin or Jehoiakim, I forget which one. But he was in the line of David, so he was a leader there. So they came to Zerubbabel and the heads of the fathers' houses and said to them, "Let us build with you. For we seek your God as you do, and we have sacrificed to him since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Assyria, who brought us here." But Zerubbabel and Jeshua, or Yeshua, and the rest of the heads of the fathers, the houses of Israel, said to them, "You may do nothing with us to build a house for our God, but we alone will build to the Lord God of Israel, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, has commanded us." Then the people of the land tried to discourage the people of Judah. They troubled them in building and hired counselors against them to frustrate their purpose all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even until the reign of Darius, king of Persia. The enemies of Judah and Benjamin try to join in rebuilding the temple. Who are these people? Well, they're called the people of the land. The land, if you remember, had been repopulated with peoples from many other lands by the Assyrians many years before. When the Assyrians came and took the northern tribes and much of the area of Judah away, they not only deported people, unlike the Babylonians, the Assyrians then took peoples from all the other lands and repopulated the area. And what we find is that 2 Kings chapter 17 says this, that the people that were there, it says this about them. They feared the Lord, or they respected Yahweh. They respected him, said, yeah, he's a God. He's a God, yeah, I know all about him. Yet they served their own gods. They just added Yahweh to the pantheon of gods that they had. They feared the Lord, but yet served their own gods according to the rituals of the nations from among whom they were carried away. That's 2 Kings 17:33. They had syncretized, they had mixed, they had combined the worship of Yahweh with other pagan rituals. So when they say, hey, we've been worshiping to him while you guys were off in Babylon, well, they were worshiping, and they were allegedly worshiping to Yahweh, but they weren't doing it according to the law. They weren't doing it according to God's command. You know, you can't just choose to worship God any which way you want to. Before I was a Christian, some of you know this, before I was a Christian, I studied theology in college. It was an effort by me to stay out of Vietnam. Figured I could get a conscientious objector status a little bit better that way. And my buddy and I had this plan that we were going to start this church, and communion was going to be reefer. We passed the reefer instead of the host. That was my plan. You can't worship God that way. You can't choose how to worship God. There's a story in the Old Testament where it says that two of the sons of the high priest brought strange fire before the Lord. They decided how they were going to worship God. And man, they were zapped. They were toast. You can't just worship God any way you want to. Well, I believe in God, and I worship him every Saturday night at the bar with bottle of Jack Daniels. And I pray before every shot. You can't do that. You can't just make it up. God is God, and he has ordained how to be worshipped. Now, he's very free and open these days. We don't have to sacrifice animals up here. I'm really glad for that. A lot of the rituals that were established according to the Old Covenant, we don't abide by. I've eaten shellfish and not been condemned for it. I've eaten a cheeseburger and not been condemned for it. Except by my wife, who's looking out for my fat intake. God is very free, but there is a way to worship him. There is a way to worship him. You can't just do it any way you want to. Now we have to understand here, the Jews were not excluding these people from coming to worship at the temple once it was rebuilt. They were saying, no, you can't build this with us. The people in the land wanted control of it. There were more of them than there were of the Jews. They wanted to get involved so that they could kind of take it over and make sure it goes the way they wanted. They wanted to have control of it. They were not coming as repentant and saying, we realize that we need to worship the Lord God Almighty, and so we want to come and help in any way we can. No, they were coming in to take over. They were coming in to take over.